Welcome back to Vinylology, where we rank the top 3,000 albums of all time. This is the 5th episode of 300 videos. Hopefully you're digging these and learning something in the process. I sure am. At the start of every episode, I almost pee a little with all of the excitement. Oops, that's probably TMI. Anyway, let us begin.
Hello.
Weezer, also known as the Green Album, is the third studio album and second self-titled album by American rock band Weezer. It was released in 2001 by Vinylrecords. It serves as the second Weezer album produced by Rick Ocasek, produced their debut album as well, and the only Weezer album to feature bassist Mikey Welsh, who replaced Matt Sharp. After the disappointing reception for their second album, Pinkerton, Weezer went on hiatus and the band members worked on side projects. During this time, their fan base grew online and Pinkerton's standing improved. After a comeback performance at the Japanese Summer Sonic Festival, Weezer began rehearsing and recording new material, where it was reported that Como had written over 120 songs during this period. Following the ambitious compositions and confessional themes of Pinkerton, Como's songs were simpler with less personal lyrics. The Green Album received generally favorable reviews. It debuted at number 4 in the United States, where it has since sold over 1.6 million copies. 3 singles were released from the album: Hashpipe, Island in the Sun, and Photograph. Hashpipe was a worldwide hit, charting on 7 different charts, and was composed in the key of A minor, and its opening line is a direct quote of the Beatles song, "You Can't Do That," which can be found on the A Hard Day's Night album. The album cover was shot between band practices and featured a band standing in front of a plain lime green backdrop in a manner similar to the band's debut album. This was done as a tribute to Rick Ocasek, who had also produced their first album, and also to symbolize the band's back-to-basics approach that they took while recording the album. After the album was released, bassist Welsh suffered a breakdown from the stress of touring, and in combination with an undiagnosed bipolar disorder and drug abuse, he attempted suicide and ultimately left Weezer in 2001. Welsh was replaced with Scott Schreiner, who would remain on as the permanent bassist to this day. Sadly, Welsh died in 2011 from a drug overdose leading to a heart attack. The Green Album received generally favorable reviews. Most critics praised the power pop and punk pop songs and loved how the album revitalized the band. However, some critics felt that the album was a bit repetitive and said it was still a disappointment and a wasted opportunity. My copy is a late 2020 limited exclusive on transparent green vinyl that was only available at Walmart in the United States. This same pressing was also an exclusive in Europe by The Sound of Vinyl, and at the time of this video recording is the most recent pressing. This looks gorgeous. I love the color, but it seems like the green vinyl should be more of a lime green to match the cover. I would think, however, that the definitive version is a 2013 Mobile Fidelity remastered reissue, which was half-speed mastered from the original master tapes. However, it has a United Kingdom radio edit version of Hashpipe for some bizarre reason, which clocks in at 2 minutes and 51 seconds, compared to the original US version of Hashpipe, which is 3 minutes 6 seconds long. By the way, what is the point of having a radio edit for a song that only shaves 15 seconds? Seems kind of pointless. The Mobile Fidelity version typically runs from $100 to $150, so be aware. I also have this on CD. My favorite songs from the albums are the hit singles Hashpipe and Island in the Sun. This might be radical to some, but I find the rest of the album a little bit boring and average. The album is also super short, being less than 30 minutes long. It seems like the goal here clearly was try to recapture the magic that was the Blue Album, especially since their second album, Pinkerton, was temporarily viewed as a failure, but I don't think it even comes close to the first album in my opinion. I personally think that some of the critic reviews that were overly positive upon release were written in response to the unjustly negative reviews on the album before it. That all being said, I give this a 7. A Salty Dog is the third studio album by English rock band Procol Harum, released in 1969 by record labels Regal, Zonophone, and A&M. A Salty Dog has a nautical theme as indicated by its cover. Interspersed with straight rock, blues, and pop items, A Salty Dog showed a slight change of direction from its predecessors, being thematically less obscure. The title track itself was the first Procol Harum track to use an orchestra. The album was the first record produced by organist and vocalist Matthew Fisher, who quit the band soon after this release. This was also the last Procol Harum album to feature bass guitarist Dave Knights. Unlike the first two band releases, this album wasn't so hastily recorded and composed, so the quality of this release is definitely an improvement over the previous work. The album was recorded in March 1969. The musical tensions between the group and Robin Trower were beginning to show in this album, and although his guitar sound remains integral to most of the tracks, Crucifixion Lane, featuring a rare Trower vocal in retrospect, sounds that Trower was already moving in a different direction from the rest of the band. Still, this album is much more musically varied than the two previous albums, with 3 Fisher vocals and 1 by Trower. The title track, backed with Long Gone Geek, reached number 44 in the UK singles chart in 1969, and the album itself reached number 27 in the albums chart. Critics were a little conflicted about the album, with some calling it clearly the band's best work, but others also calling it at times surprisingly mediocre and trivial. The title track has often been lauded as one of the finest songs ever to come from Procol Harum and one of the best pieces of progressive rock ever heard. The title track was also covered by the band Transatlantic and was sung by drummer Mike Portnoy. Styx covered the song on their cover album Big Bang Theory, and Sarah Brightman covered the song too on her album Dive. The cover is a reinterpretation of a popular pack of cigarettes from John Player & Sons called Player's Navy Cut. John Player & Sons is a British tobacco and cigarette manufacturer and has origins back to the early 18th century, and were the first company to offer pre-packaged tobacco as a consumer product. In 1901, Players merged with the Imperial Tobacco Group based in Nottingham, England, to be more competitive with brands from the USA at the time. There are numerous copies and pressings over the years from 1969 to present. My copy is a reissue from 1979, pressed by RCA Indianapolis, which sounds decent. I don't have it, but I would speculate that the best version might be the 2017 Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab pressing. These tend to go for around $100 these days. My personal grade is a 7. This is a very nice album, and it really does not sound dated at all, and I also can appreciate that it was groundbreaking in the progressive rock genre. I also like the orchestral touches, like on Wreck of the Hesperus, and the nautical theme throughout. You can almost kind of even imagine sailing on the seas listening to this. As noted, A Salty Dog has become a progressive rock classic, and rightfully so, and I really like the last song, Pilgrim's Progress, whose organ playing sounds very similar to Procol Harum's big hit, A Whiter Shade of Pale. However, I really don't think, though, that this quite reaches a level of a masterpiece. It is very solid from beginning to end. The band sounds tight, and Trower shows guitar brilliance as expected, but it just doesn't cross the threshold into brilliance territory if you ask me. This is Procol Harum's only entry on the list. Magic Christian Music is the first studio album by the British rock band Badfinger, released in early 1970 on Apple Records. The band had previously released the album Maybe Tomorrow in 1969 under the name The Ivies, which became the first non-Beatles group signed by the Beatles' Apple label in 1968. Apple Records suggested that the band change their name from The Ivies to Badfinger, which was in reference to Badfinger Boogie, an early working title of the Beatles song With a Little Help from My Friends, as John Lennon had hurt his forefinger on a piano and was only using one finger during the demo recording. George Harrison also later stated that the band was named after Helga Babdinger, who was a stripper that the Beatles had known in Hamburg, Germany. Their best known lineup of the band consisted of Pete Ham, Mike Gibbons, Tom Evans, and Joey Mollen, and they are recognized for their huge influence on the 1970s power pop genre. 3 tracks from the LP are featured in the film The Magic Christian, which also gives the album its title, and on that film's soundtrack. The soundtrack album was released on the little-known Commonwealth United Records label in the United States. As a result, it received little promotion in the US and remained mostly unknown to American record buyers. To capitalize on this gap, Apple Records released its own pseudo-soundtrack. Apple combined the film's 3 Badfinger songs with 4 unreleased songs and 7 older tracks from the album Maybe Tomorrow, which had been quickly pulled off the market in 1969 after having only been released in Germany, Japan, and Italy. The previously released Ivy songs were specifically remixed for this album, significantly improving their sound quality in the process. The album peaked at number 55 on the US charts and had one hit single, Come and Get It, which was written and produced by Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney got personally involved with the band after reading an interview with the band where they were complaining of their neglect by the Apple Records label. The whole group was excited to work with McCartney so much that they couldn't sleep the night before. McCartney only spent an hour producing the track, forcing them to completely copy his demo and not change anything at all. After Come and Get It was successfully recorded, McCartney offered to produce two of the Ivies' original compositions to add to the soundtrack, which were the songs Carry On Till Tomorrow and Rock of All Ages. McCartney then recruited Beatles producer George Martin to provide the string arrangement for Carry On Till Tomorrow. I have a 1970 Capitol Records Winchester pressing, and it is admittedly kind of rough with some noticeable scratches and the like, but it plays without skipping. There are not any modern repressings for this, but I think it is possible with Apple Records slowly re-releasing their catalog, but for now either look for a 1970s pressing or try and get the 1991 remastered European release that includes an additional 7-inch single with 2 extra songs, Storm in a Teacup and Arthur. I really like this album. In retrospect, it really sounds like a lost Beatles record, which is kind of creepy in how close it sounds, even with ex-Beatle members being involved. The Paul McCartney opening track, Come and Get It, is great, and also I like Dear Angie and Carry On Till Tomorrow. The album really is consistent throughout. My score is a 7. If you like the Beatles, I find it hard to believe that you will not like this as well. Children of the Sun is a third studio album by Australian musician Billy Thorpe, released in 1979. The album spawned the singles Wrapped in the Chains of Your Love, Goddess of the Night, Children of the Sun, and Simple Life. The album peaked at number 44 on the Australian charts. Billy Thorpe had a vast career in popular Australian music. At the age of 10, he was appearing regularly on Queensland television. When he was 17, he continued as a solo country and pop singer just as the Beatles were breaking. Later, Thorpe teamed up with the instrumental band The Aztecs, and together they became one of the first Australian groups to contribute to the new 60s era of pop. Thorpe also became the star of his own national TV show, It's All Happening. In the space of 2 years, he had scored 9 major hits in Australia. During the 1970s, Thorpe became a solo artist, and with Children of the Sun, reached his highest Australia and US chart performance. Thorpe later died in 2007 from a massive heart attack and was posthumously appointed a member of the Order of Australia in his honor. In December 2020, Thorpe was listed at number 31 in Rolling Stone Australia's 50 Greatest Australian Artists of All Time issue. The front cover was done by Stanley Mouse and Alton Kelly, who were a duo of artists that were notable for their psychedelic rock posters for mostly San Francisco bands such as the Grateful Dead, as well as their album covers for the band Journey. My copy is one of the 1979 original pressings, in particular a United States Columbia Records Pittman Plant pressing. This has not been re-released since 1979 on vinyl, so you have to hunt down one of the 1979 versions, but it's still fairly easy to find a copy, especially online. My copy must also have been a promo or a giveaway since it has a big 96 Rock sticker on the front jacket. This was also partially re-released as a Children of the Sun Revisited album in 1987. This basically is considered a compilation album, since it only includes the 5 songs from the B-side of the original album, plus 3 newly recorded tracks, along with the 1982 song East of Eden's Gate as a closing track. This particular version was only put out in the United States and must have been a money grab by CBS Records. I recommend again getting the original version. You can easily tell the two versions apart since they have different covers. My personal grade for this album is a 7. This is really an underappreciated gem and really deserves more recognition, and hopefully it being on the top 3,000 albums list of all time highlights that. The classic track here is Children of the Sun. Absolutely amazing track that never gets old and usually spawns the question, who was that, upon people hearing it. Other songs on the album are also good, like Wrapped in Chains and Goddess of the Night, but really the whole thing is a very nice guitar-driven album that is pleasing from beginning to end. This is the only Billy Thorpe album on the list. And Then There Were Three is the 9th studio album by the English rock band Genesis. It was released in 1978 by Charisma Records and is the first recording for them as just a trio of singer-drummer Phil Collins, keyboardist Tony Banks, and bassist-guitarist Mike Rutherford, following the departure of guitarist Steve Hackett. The album marked a change in the band's sound, mixing elements of their progressive rock roots with shorter material, and Collins contributing to more of the group's songwriting. The motivation for this was to be able to put more musical ideas ideas on the album and to act as a response to the punk rock and new wave scenes where short and concise songs were standard. Guitarist Steve Hackett had just left the band as he wished to pursue a solo career. He also had started to dislike the musical compromises in Genesis and felt more comfortable working as a solo artist. The remaining trio were confident that they could carry on as they had formed the backbone of several Genesis classic songs already. Thus, they did not hire any additional or replacement members, with the three band members handling most instrumental duties in the studio from this point on. Rutherford, in particular, wanted to forge his own style and did not copy Hackett's distinctive guitar tones, so the album was more dominated by Banks' keyboards with simpler guitar parts. Banks and Rutherford remained the more dominant songwriters. Collins had settled down with his wife and 2 children, meaning he did not find much time to bring new compositions to the sessions. Rutherford later said he was impressed that the group wrote the song Follow You, Follow Me, as they had had difficulty writing songs that worked within a 3 to 4 minute framework. Genesis deliberately placed that song at the end of the album to end the album on a lighter note. The staff at Atlantic Records recognized it as a potential hit single for the band, and the lyrics were written by Rutherford and were inspired by his wife. The album reached U.S. platinum status for selling 1 million copies and was considered a commercial breakthrough for Genesis, as it brought in sufficiently large audiences to be able to make a profit from touring, which before then they have always run at a loss. The album received mixed reviews from critics, but reached number 3 on the UK Albums Chart and number 14 on the US Billboard 200. The lead single, Follow You, Follow Me, became their highest charting single at that point, reaching number 7 in the UK and number 23 in the US. As with their past 3 studio albums, the album cover and packaging was designed by Storm Thorgerson and Aubrey Powell of Hypnosis. Thorgerson said that the cover was trying to tell a story by the traces left by the light trails and was done using time-lapse photography, alluding to the change in personnel. My copy is a 1978 Atlantic Records Specialty Records pressing that is a little too used, and I probably should get a better copy, but it has a great dynamic range score. There are numerous pressings over the years for this. Apparently the ones put out in the 1980s are the worst. There are a few modern pressings which are on 180 gram vinyl and sound nice. The best supposedly is a 2015 half-speed remastered pressing from Rhino Records, but knowing Rhino, that is probably most likely digitally sourced. This is a good but slightly uneven album. My score is a 7. It's still so weird to me how close Phil Collins sounds to former vocalist Peter Gabriel on the song Down and Out, which is a great song with its complex time signatures. The lyrics cover the topic of record labels who drop artists when they are no longer in fashion. The soaring chorus of the song Snowbound gives me goosebumps, wow. And Follow You, Follow Me is also wonderful, with those great keyboards, but in hindsight, I could imagine some segment of Genesis' progressive rock audience not liking that particular song, realizing that was a key transitional composition between old progressive rock Genesis and their more and more commercialized upcoming output. However, I think progressive rock fans will still at least appreciate this album with most of the content. The Eraser is a debut solo album by English musician Tom York, released in 2006 through XL Recordings. It was produced by Nigel Godrich, the longtime producer for York's band Radiohead. The Eraser comprises electronic music York recorded during Radiohead's 2004 hiatus, right after their Hell to the Thief album. The lyrics express York's political concerns. For example, he wrote Harrow Downhill about the death of British weapons inspector David Kelly, a whistleblower who died after telling a reporter that the British government had falsely identified weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Kelly's body was found in the Harrow Downhill woods near York's former school in Oxfordshire. York was uncomfortable about the subject matter and conscious of Kelly's grieving family, but felt that not to have written it perhaps would have been worse. In an interview with The Observer, he said that it was the angriest song he had ever written. York wanted to mainly use computers during recording. To generate ideas, he cut and pasted clips at random from Radiohead's library of original samples, many of which had been created on laptops in hotel rooms as the band toured. He would send fragments to Godrich, who identified passages that could become songs, who also then edited them and returned them to York. To create the title track, York sampled piano chords played by Radiohead guitarist Greenwood and cut them into a new order. And It Rained All Night contains a sample from the Hell to the Thief track, The Gloaming, and Black Swan samples a rhythm recorded by Radiohead guitarist Ed O'Brien and drummer Philip Selway in 2000. York said Horror Downhill had been kicking around during the Hell to the Thief sessions, but felt it could not have worked as a Radiohead song. Initially to be instrumental tracks, vocals were added at producer Godrich's encouragement. The cover art was a liner cut titled London Views by longtime Radiohead collaborator Stanley Donwood, which was inspired by the 2004 Boscastle flood and depicts the legend of King Canute failing to command the ocean, which York likened to the negative British government attitudes towards climate change. Donwood also felt The Eraser was a very English record and that the London imagery fits this. All formats of the album packaging avoided using plastic, again an ode to environmental concerns. For the album's release, the song Black Swan was used in the closing credits of the film A Scanner Darkly. The Eraser debuted at number 3 on the UK Albums Chart and number 2 on the American Billboard 200. The album was also released on iTunes. 2 singles were released, Horror Downhill, which reached number 23 on the UK Singles Chart, and Analyze. Critic receptions were mostly positive but mixed. Most praised York's vocals, but many felt that the songs were just not catchy enough. It, however, was named one of the best albums of 2006 by NME, Rolling Stone, and The Observer, and was nominated for the 2006 Mercury Music Prize and a 2007 Grammy Award for Best Alternative Music Album. My vinyl copy is a 2006 XL Recordings pressing. It has been reissued a few different times, and all the pressings appear to be basically the same, only with slightly different custom labels at times. One particular UK 2006 pressing has an embossed cover, but the rest do not. York stated that he chose XL because they are very mellow with no corporate ethic, which he appreciated. I gave the album a score of 7. It is good, just not fantastic. The best songs in my opinion are the first 3 songs, The Eraser, Analyze, and The Clock, as well as Horror Downhill. The Clock is an incredible piece of work particularly. I love the layers and the driving beat, but many of the other songs are good but just don't stand out that much either, especially the second side. This is Tom York's only solo recording on the list. Rotting Pinata is a debut studio album by American rock band Sponge, released in 1994 through Work Records. Hit singles from the album, such as Plowed and Molly, 16 Candles Down the Drain, helped launch the band's career, and the album was certified platinum in the United States. Although released in August 1994, the album did not enter the Billboard 200 until February 1995. This was mostly because the record label decided to release the song Nina Menashe as the lead single, and it was clear that was a mistake. Once the second single, Plowed, was finally released, it became almost instantly successful with its great guitar lead riff and was promoted well on outlets like alternative rock radio stations and on MTV. On the album, the version that was used is basically the original demo track, and the song was written in a couple hours while lead singer Vinny Dombrowski was shoveling snow. After the success of Plowed and Molly, Rotting Pinata ultimately peaked at number 58 on the US charts and remained on the chart for 40 weeks. Rotting Pinata received mostly positive reviews. Some reviewers just simply labeled the band as a Stone Temple Pilots ripoff, but others were more positive about the album, noting Plowed and Molly as having catchy hooks and hummable choruses. Plowed was later available as a playable song on the video game Guitar Hero Warriors of Rock, and also of interest, the song was heavily played on Howard Stern's radio show from 2017 to approximately early 2019, which created a resurgence to the band in this album. The band even played on Howard Stern's radio show in late 2018, around the time of the album's 25th anniversary. My copy is an extremely cool looking 2020 remastered repress with a yellow and orange smoke on clear transparent vinyl, which was limited to 700 copies. They also released a yellow and orange splatter limited at only 300 copies at the same time. For a modern release, the dynamic range is surprisingly not that bad. Besides a couple of other limited repressings put out the 2 years prior in 2018, you would have to go all the way back to the 1994 original release, which is super hard to find and very expensive. I personally just seek out one of the 2018 or 2020 repressings, since hunting down an original should not be that big of a difference. My personal score for this is a 7. I have to admit that I have always had a soft spot for this band. I remember seeing them play live on the side stage at Lollapalooza in 1996 in Rockingham, North Carolina, to a group of probably less than 100 people. Here is my ticket stub. Cloud instantly hooked me, and I still absolutely love it. Molly is also extremely catchy. Other songs in this release fall into the good category, whereas the rest of it's just decent. Sponge unfortunately really did not do anything to really make themselves stand apart from the rest of the alternative rock crowd, so they tend to get overlooked or forgotten. Even though this is Sponge's only album on the list, if you like this, I highly encourage you to look at their next two albums, even though neither are on vinyl. The songs Wax Ecstatic, My Purity, 1000 Times, and Radio Prayer Line are all personal favorites and are all very catchy and hook written. Bombs Away Dream Babies is an album by Jon Stewart that was released on RSO Records in 1979. Jon Stewart was an American songwriter and singer and was best known for his contributions to the American folk music movement of the 1960s while with the Kingston Trio. He was also a popular music songwriter. For example, he wrote the Monkees' #1 hit, Daydream Believer, and he also had a solo career spanning 40 years that included almost 4 dozen albums and more than 600 recorded songs. Jon Stewart died in 2008 from complications of Alzheimer's disease and a stroke at the age of 68, and he was continuously recording and playing live shows up to his death. The album peaked at number 10 on the Billboard album chart and yielded 3 top 40 singles. This was the best-selling album of Stewart's career. Though usually successful with critics and with a core group of fans, Stewart's albums were not considered commercial successes. He left Capitol Records after only 2 solo releases and was signed by Warner Brothers Records, where he had also recorded just 2 albums before moving on to RCA Records, with whom he released 3 LPs. Stewart followed his release from RCA Records with a contract at RSO Records, the same organization that serviced the recording contracts for Eric Clapton, the Bee Gees, as well as several other disco performers. It was at RSO Records that Stewart finally enjoyed his most commercially successful years as a solo artist. Bombs Away Dream Babies hit the top 10 and temporarily turned him into a new pop star at the age of 40. Stewart's folk leanings are evident on the album, but it's mostly a straightforward pop rock affair. Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks, both of Fleetwood Mac, riding high on their success of their album Rumors, appeared on the album. Nicks sang backup vocals, Buckingham sang, played guitar, and co-produced. The song Gold was the first single and the biggest hit, reaching number 5 on the singles chart. Gold was a thinly veiled criticism of the music business set to a smooth shuffle beat. Ironically, the song became a parody unto itself, where the success of the song itself seemed to be in conflict with the lyrical content. Perhaps fittingly, considering the song's cynical attitude, Stewart would later stop performing Gold in concert, calling it vapid and empty. The artist further claimed the tune meant nothing to him, having done it for money and to please his record company. Many people think the guitar solo is by Lindsey Buckingham, but it is actually performed by Stewart. 2 other tracks, the darkly dramatic Midnight Wind and the bittersweet Lost Her in the Sun, would also hit the top 40. Midnight Wind and Somewhere Down the Line had Stewart's wife Buffy Ford Stewart singing backup vocals. My vinyl copy is a 1979 Columbia Records Pittman pressing. With the popularity of the album in the late 70s, there are many different pressings in that time period, but it has not been repressed at all since. My personal grade for this is a 7. The song Gold is a monster smash. I seriously would put this on my top 30 songs of all time list if I would ever do that. The background vocals by Stevie Nicks just add so much to the song with a cynical view of the Los Angeles recording industry. However, the entire album is solid and very likable, with the songs Lost Her in the Sun, Runaway Full of Love, Midnight Wind all being particularly great. This is definitely a great album suggestion that often gets overlooked and is Jon Stewart's only album on the list.
Hello.
Polygon Wonderland is a 12th studio album by Australian psychedelic rock band King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, who had formed in the year 2010. The band is fronted by Stu McKenzie, who is a multi-instrumentalist and singer. They are known for exploring multiple genres, staging energetic live shows, and building a prolific discography, having released 18 studio albums, 9 live albums, 2 compilations, and 2 EPs in just a 10-year period.
Hello.
I see
portmanteau of the words Polygon and Gondwanaland, and it was the fourth of 5 albums released by the band in 2017. One of the most interesting things about this particular album is that it was released under open source license. The band uploaded the master tapes online for anyone to use. During the band announcement, it was stated that the album would be completely free and encouraged fans to make their own copies and bootlegs of the album. The band said that they would not be selling the album in any shape or form, even going so far as to put the master tapes online, including the vinyl master for free use. The album was uploaded to streaming services such as Spotify and Apple Music. Masters and artboard files could be downloaded from the band's website for personal use or for pressing CDs and vinyl. On the day of the announcement, multiple labels announced they would be producing their own physical copies of the album. Fans also started crowdfunding campaigns on sites like Facebook and Kickstarter to produce their own version of the album. The song The Fourth Color has the band trying their hand at octating, a technique where multiple singers share a single melody, alternating delivery across multiple notes. King Gizzard's decision to give listeners control over the record's musical production seems to reflect the album's musical shift. Progressive rock is a genre known for discarding traditional structures and often failing to land perfectly, so King Gizzard is helping to bring the genre more into broad daylight with this release, and the band is smart enough for giving listeners a way to participate. The album positions King Gizzard as a band more concerned with experimenting openly, which appeals to the group's ever-expanding fan base. Polygon Wonderland was generally well received by professional music critics upon its initial release. Critics praised the different sonic flourishes, but generally soured on that there was not an overall hired concept and thought the album played it too safely. Most agreed that Polygon Wonderland sounds like a consolidation of everything the band had done up to that point, consolidated into large and small chunks of psychedelic rock. Pitchfork ranked the album in their list of the 20 best rock albums of 2017. The way that the album was given away was both applauded by some and by others labeled as a gimmick. My copy is a 2021 pressing from Needle Juice Records, pressed on yellow translucent vinyl with blue and red that reminds me of a beach ball, and was limited to 750 copies and was a Newberry Comics exclusive. The second side ends with a deadlight groove of the character Han Toomey, the confused cyborg, from their album Murder of the Universe, who is saying hello over and over again until you lift the needle. Hello. 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 With the nature of the way that this album was just given away, you have over 200 vinyl versions currently available. Anyone literally could grab the master files and pay to get your own version pressed, which is absolutely amazing if you think about it. Some of the versions have used different jacket artwork, and you generally have many different vinyl coloring variations. I've tried to show a few of them here. The best songs on here, in my opinion, is the over 10-minute opener, Crumbling Castle, the song Desert Dunes, Welcome Weary Feet, and the album closer, The Fourth Color. Other songs are good, and then yet others just don't really seem overly special. The song Searching sounds like a modern-day Pink Floyd song to me. It is probably the most psychedelic song on here, but as a package, the music is fairly solid and consistent. You would probably assume that something just given away is not of high value, but I can assure you that is not the case with regards to this album. This is one of the best King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard albums to date. Blueprint is a third studio album and fourth album overall by Irish guitarist Rory Gallagher, released in 1973. Rory Gallagher was an Irish blues and rock guitarist, singer, songwriter, and producer. Gallagher formed the band Taste in the late 1960s and recorded solo albums throughout the 1970s and 1980s. His albums have sold over 30 million copies worldwide. With his first band Taste and with his solo band up to this point, Gallagher was one of the first guitarists to lead a power trio lineup. With this particular album Blueprint, Gallagher included a keyboardist for the first time, a guy named Lou Martin, who was the keyboardist from the band Killing Floor. This four-piece lineup was to be Gallagher's most successful, resulting in many of his most popular songs and documented in live film and TV appearances on shows such as the Old Grey Whistle Test. The band would play together in this formation for 5 years. The album title and artwork were taken from the blueprint of a Stramp Power Baby amplifier that had been custom designed for Gallagher in Hamburg. It was compact enough to fit into the small luggage compartment of a 1970s Volkswagen Beetle. For some reason, on many CD versions, a different cover was used. Blueprint illustrated Gallagher's eclectic musical influences. Walk on Hot Coals features Gallagher's stinging guitar and Lou Martin's insistent piano. There is also an acoustic run-through of Big Bill Broonzy's Banker's Blues, the ragtime unmilitary two-step, as well as an unusually straightforward country tune, If I Had a Reason, with Roy on lap steel and Martin doing his best honky-tonk, all of which effectively breaks up the blues rock that remains the soul of the album. The album's centerpiece, a brooding seventh son of a seventh son, finds the band locked into a swampy groove for over 8 minutes as Gallagher abbreviates his own solo, providing room for Martin's aggressive piano. On Hands Off, the guitar even picks up a saxophone, and he shows off his spooky Muddy Waters inspired slide on the song Race the Breeze. In the later years of his life, Gallagher developed a phobia of flying. To overcome this, he was prescribed various drugs. He was prescribed paracetamol for the pain, a drug that can be extremely harmful to the liver, especially for a heavy drinker such as Gallagher. By the time of his final performance in 1995 in the Netherlands, he was visibly ill with severe abdominal pain, and the tour had to be canceled. Gallagher received a liver transplant in that same year, but died of complications in London at the age of 47. Gallagher's body was buried in St. Oliver's Cemetery near Cork City, Ireland. The grave's headstone is in the image of an award he received in 1972 for International Guitarist of the Year. My copy is a really clean copy of a 1973 Monarch Records pressing. I remember getting this from a yard sale near Atlanta, Georgia from a lady that had albums in her hot garage and on tables in her front yard cooking in the sun, but it sounds great. Besides the multiple 1973 pressings, there had been various reissues over the years, the most recent being a 2018 180 gram pressing that was mastered in 2011 from the original master tapes and had notes from Roy's brother included. Known more for his phenomenal live shows and recordings, this album is still great. Daughter of the Everglades should have been a rock classic. Wow, that song is the absolute bomb. I also really like Hands Off and The Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. Roy totally shows off his harmonica playing on the song Banker's Blues. The band sounds nice and tight and seem to be having a good time playing together. This entire release sounds nice and jammy and bluesy in all the right places. I really wish I saw this guy live. I give this album a 7. And another world-changing episode of Vinylology has come to a close. It's time like this that brings me to the edge of tears. How can the world be so unjust? Hopefully, we won't have long to wait until the next episode. I recommend that we all just keep hitting the F5 buttons on our keyboards to pass the time until that wonderful moment of episode 6 finally hitting the streets. Till then, have a good one.
Hello.